Hi everyone, thank you for interrupting the coffee break to join us for the second panel of the Paris Cyber Summit today. It's very nice to see faces together in a room and to do conferences again. I'm still sort of happily surprised by the post-COVID vibe of conferences, and I'm happy that we can share that here today. I'm Laurens Cyrillus. I'm cybersecurity editor at Politico Europe, based in Brussels, where we cover cybersecurity policy and politics across the continent and across the world. And I'm moderating the second session of the summit, which is on securing critical infrastructure. So we're moving from war situation to critical infrastructure to discuss a little how that has changed. This session is going to be largely in English, and there's translation outside. For those of you who just came into the summit, there's translation outside if you need it into French. We're going to be discussing largely in English, but I do invite people in the audience to ask questions, and that can be in French just as much as in English, if you please. So, if we get into the topic of critical infrastructure, I think we've seen a couple of incidents in the past year or so that have really sort of shaped our thinking around this, and the Colonial Pipeline incident would be one. And then most recently, we've seen the Viasat incident. There's been the Irish healthcare attack with ransomware. That all happened in the span of sort of the last 12 months, and it's showing more and more that critical infrastructure is really sort of the most important point of the questions around cybersecurity that politicians and industries are confronted with today. At the same time, there's digitization, which is increasing pressure on industries. We're seeing that governments as well are developing their thinking on the policy framework to respond to these pressures on critical infrastructure. And we're going to get into all those topics in the session today. To do that, I've got the pleasure of welcoming 5 very qualified panelists and speakers on stage with me. I will introduce them to you. So first of all, we've got David Mussington, who's Executive Assistant for Infrastructure, Executive Assistant Director at Cybersecurity and at the, apologies. Executive Assistant Director for Infrastructure Security at the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA, of the United States government. Thank you, David, for joining us. So secondly, we've got Margiris Abukevicius, who's Vice Minister for National Defense in Lithuania. Hi, nice to see you, Margiris. Thirdly, we've got Dan Cimpean, Director of the National Cybersecurity Directorate in Romania, who's joining us to talk to us today. And then we've got Rastislav Janota, who is Director of National Cybersecurity Center SK CERT in the Slovak Republic. And lastly, we've got Jacques de La Rivière, CEO of Gatewatcher, a French cybersecurity firm heavily involved in critical infrastructure security. The good news is that these are all extremely qualified panelists to talk on critical infrastructure. The bad news is that we're all men. So we're dealing with the first manel of this summit, for which I feel a need to slightly apologize. But I can give you a quick heads up that tomorrow there is a keynote by a leader of the Women for Cyber initiative in France on promoting skills in the sector. So that might be a good heads up to go and attend that. I'm going to give some time to the speakers to develop a little statement at the start of the session, but I also want to flag already now that throughout the session, throughout the discussion, I'm very happy to take questions from the floor. So please, if you have questions, don't hesitate. This can be a lively discussion, interactive discussion. You can raise your hand or stand up, and I'll also build in moments to actually ask you for questions, so don't hesitate to then intervene. So, I'd like to start with Mr. David Mussington. David, if you want to give us your thoughts on the topic of critical infrastructure, that'd be fantastic.
Sure, thank you. Thank you for the invitation, and thanks to be here in person. I was speaking at last year's session virtually, and it's nice to be able to travel again and to come to Paris. It's it's a great occasion, and thanks to Bastian for the invitation again. In terms of critical infrastructure, first I should introduce our agency, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, which is both cyber and physical infrastructure oriented. Most of what we do more publicly is focused around cyber risk management and risk reduction programming with the private sector, with our 16 critical infrastructure sectors in the United States, and through liaison with our international partners. My division and a big center of gravity for CISA is physical infrastructure risk assessment, though, and often that means cyber-physical integration of risk that shows you the vector or channel for delivering disruptive efficacy, cyber, and the physical effects which affect the economy, critical infrastructure, or homeland and national security. So that's sort of the ambit of CISA's mandate. A couple of points just to introduce what we want to do. What we're doing is we're a new agency, we're 3.5 years old. We are, in a sense, a culmination of 20 years of programmatic and policy and risk development across the cybersecurity envelope, from ambiguity about whether states could achieve strategic effect through cyberspace to the end of ambiguity with what's going on in Ukraine. From questions about whether public and private sector could collaborate for risk management to different models of risk management involving public-private partnerships in different countries, which converge to show, I think at least in the West, that it is possible to build capacity at the sub-state level, cities, regions, etc. But it's also possible for industry to see and find its way to collaborate with governments, mostly democratic governments, to advance a higher cause, which is national and homeland security. That's a journey we've been on in the United States, and I think it's a journey that many countries that from specialists I've spoken to here recognize that journey, that it's not a theoretical journey about conflicts of interest between private business and government. It's increasingly a narrative about principle of free people, free to govern themselves as they choose with territorial integrity. And that's why I was so affected by the comments from the Vice Prime Minister today from Ukraine, which has really drawn a line under the issues that are at stake in determining the future of cyberspace, because I think that's what critical infrastructure, cybersecurity and critical infrastructure, cybersecurity and resilience is about. It's about how can liberal democratic states, Western states, collaborate effectively to oppose the autocrats in our world that would like to foreclose the openness of the internet, foreclose the internet of cyberspace, and make us just less free, make us fail to live up to the aspirations of the internet's creators. So CISA is driven by that desire to protect openness, by the United States' commitment to help friends and allies to reinforce that shared commitment to openness, and to do that through collaboration on critical infrastructure risk management in a way that depresses the ability of autocrats, adversaries, criminals, name your particular category of actor, to foreclose the ability of property owners, intellectual property owners, data owners, those interested in privacy, those who want to foreclose the options of those legitimate citizen groups are the opposition that we seek to impede. So CISA has an international strategy, CISA Global, which, consistent with the Biden-Harris administration, shows our commitment to expand the circle of those involved in critical infrastructure protection and cybersecurity to the maximum extent possible, sharing capacity with our allies and friends, new and old, and to draw a line where autocrats do not get to foreclose the open possibility of cyberspace because it is their intent to do so. I do believe it's their intent to do so. We're going to take actions, as we can see, through policies to ensure that we have the maximum possibility of success. I'll end with that.
It's very interesting. We're going to get into where that line is exactly in our discussion later, I think. Margiris, if I can invite you to give your initial thoughts on the subject.
Thanks, Lawrence, and thanks for having me second year in a row on this panel and in this event. And it's a really, I think, important topic, and I really appreciate that we have a session dedicated to critical infrastructure. And as the previous panel and discussion showed very clearly, the importance of a critical infrastructure in times of crisis. You mentioned yourself, some some big attacks against critical infrastructure, which are equally important when it comes to peacetime. So I will start by giving you some points, and then we could develop further when we will have a discussion. So first, I think it's which should be understood that critical infrastructure is and will be a most contested cyber infrastructure, and I would say, and I would focus more on APTs and state-sponsored actors attacking the critical infrastructure and having a particular interest in disrupting, placing espionage activities on the critical infrastructure and so forth. And we should very clearly say that probably Russia and China are the most active actors in that field, and of course much is at stake, as it was explained in a first panel, that it's about very often states' ability to deliver services to people and functioning of a state and functioning of the critical sectors. The second thing, of course, is important to talk about. Critical infrastructure and cybersecurity is a very complex issue. We could discuss and talk from cyber hygiene to standards to compliance and cybersecurity requirements. And I think this debate was evolving. I remember a couple of years ago, the keyword probably was still a resilience. Now the keyword when it comes to security of critical infrastructure is supply chain security. There are differences, but there are many similarities. It's just a different branding. And I would like to touch, as I mentioned, there are a lot of elements, but one is very critical, where our government was paying recently a lot of attention, is technology itself. What kind of technology we have in that critical infrastructure, and on what type of technology we depend. Are we depending on the adversaries' technology, as that is adversaries, autocrats, technology that was emphasized in the first panel? It was mentioned already now. And let me briefly draw a parallel with energy security, which is now very much also debated, and we've been speaking about energy security for years, about limiting our dependence on Russia, on our adversary, and now we see the results. Some countries took needed decisions, and now they have alternative sources. Some are not, and in a crisis like this, you see the vulnerabilities. It's not only about price; it's about being cut off, possibility of cutting you off from energy resources. It's about not only political pressure, which has always been associated with dependence on energy. So my point would be that this parallel is also important for cybersecurity and technologies and critical infrastructure, because and we see how difficult it is when you are dependent on your adversary on energy. So imagine that in a crisis you are dependent on the technologies of your adversary. And that dependence and to go away from that dependence will be much harder than it is now. And I think the sooner we start, the better we are off in a longer term. And last point, what we have done and how we approached very quickly in Lithuania that issue. From the very beginning, when the current government took office, we had a very clear strategy, two-step strategy. One, I think, 5G. Many of our governments took decisions, different decisions, but aiming at the same. That we want to build our critical infrastructure, 5G infrastructure, and be not dependent on Chinese technologies. So our choice was, again, you can always have risk-based or more technological solution, or you can have a political solution. Our case was we really went for a political approach. We said that we will allow only companies from EU, NATO, and OECD countries to participate in a 5G infrastructure build-up. But the second step was, which we finished just recently, and the law was adopted, public procurement law was adopted just recently, 1 month ago. I think that is new, and that is a new trend where we should be looking to. We really want to extend and to go beyond the 5G infrastructure and beyond the telecommunication sector, because critical infrastructure is really about finances, it's about energy, and all of those areas are dependent. So our solution was as follows. We have identified around 400 organizations, critical sector operators, essential sector operators, private state institutions. We have compiled quite an extensive list of ICT equipment and services, which we see could pose a risk if we depend on our adversaries' technologies in that field. And we have compiled a very short list of adversaries, China, Russia, Belarus in our geographical area. So those companies, those 400 companies, will not be allowed, already now are not allowed to buy that ICT equipment and those services from manufacturers and vendors from those countries. Let's see how it will work. I really believe that in 2025, when this transition period will end, when we will get rid of existing infrastructure, existing manufacturers and existing ICT equipment from those countries fully in those organizations, our critical infrastructure will be much more secure. And I think that is one of the issues we should see how within EU debate we can draw some lessons and use that examples. Thank you.
Let's see what the other parts of the European Union think of those points. Dan, if I can just ask you for your initial thoughts on the subject.
Thank you so much. Part of my job is to worry. I worry day in, day out, and of course I worry about cybersecurity. I worry about how resilient, how solid is our national critical infrastructure, critical information infrastructure. How well do we play our role as members of this ecosystem, whether we are governmental bodies or businesses or, I don't know, academia, others that produce the brains we have to use in order to support this infrastructure. So what we did in Romania and the way we approach it, we had pretty serious reflection on this topic. And we came to one conclusion, amongst others, that things are moving really fast and are getting very, very complicated. And that no one single organization, it's strong enough, capable enough to really tackle the challenges we observe. So we came to the conclusion that we have to do something with the way we organize the ecosystem, because it's an entire ecosystem that has to work on cybersecurity related topics, in particular for CIPs and CIIPs. That's one of the reasons I'm here representing one pretty brand new Romanian Cyber Directorate, which, mind you, has to be a hub between business, governmental, and academic sectors. The reason being very, very simple, in our view. Most of those infrastructures, most of the knowledge, let's say the capability, the capacity to do something with regards to security of those infrastructures, de facto are in private hands, in the hands of technology providers, the hands of infrastructure operators, and so on and so on. Of course, we can regulate them. They can be subject to a variety of legal acts, rules, guidelines, orders, etc. But in practice, themselves on their own, alone, they cannot self-regulate and they may not, I'm choosing carefully my words now, they may not take the right initiatives, the right actions, they may not implement the right measures that we want with regards to those infrastructures. On the other hand, governments themselves, they don't always have the clear view on what precisely has to be protected, on what is the technology landscape we are dealing with, on what are the precise type of actors and attackers in particular that are super active with regards to those. So we have a pretty much a common problem with a very complicated solution. And for instance, in Romania, I have to provide the answers to simple questions like, how resilient are we? Where do we stand? Is it good or bad? Are we going to have problems with regards to our CIP, CIPs, and so on? Are we ready for the next big incident, for a crisis with a strong cyber component? So very simple questions with extremely complicated answers. And as I said, a conclusion was that we got to work as an ecosystem. Of course, thinking in terms of one country, it's also childish, in my humble opinion. Very simple. In cyberspace, there are no borders. Attacks come from all over the place. Help and solutions come from all over the place. And we see, especially these weeks and months, and I'm personally super pleased about this, an exceptional level of cooperation and collaboration, in particular on the eastern flank of NATO. And amazingly, some of the most active and committed members of the ecosystem were private businesses. I'm not saying that because I come from the private business myself, but really what we noted, organizations that produce, that deliver amazing technical solutions, but they're not very visible, not very well known in Europe or internationally, were the ones to move super fast, come with state-of-the-art solutions, and in many cases, they offer them at no cost, in particular cases, in order to overcome specific situation. Just to give the example, and sorry for getting back to the Ukraine situation, we get one case when one private actor offered their solutions, cyber solutions, for free to any Ukrainian governmental business or business bodies or citizen at no cost for as long as possible, as long as needed. That's the term to use. So they are super interesting developments, super interesting initiatives. Now, who has the magic solution? No one. Shall we openly talk about this, in particular about the challenges we have? In my humble opinion, definitely yes. And I still believe, without succeeding in creating a very robust ecosystem to really focus on cybersecurity, to really take some measures with regards to those infrastructures, we are going to be still in a very reactive mode. We are going to be quite a lot behind some attackers that operate at will, I dare to say. And we are going to forget about even more important elements, like, just to give a couple examples, insider threats. Because we talk about external attackers. State actor A or B is going to attack our infrastructure, and we forget about the basics. Insider threats, education of the decision makers, very basic cyber hygiene measures that we have to do it. And to give one extra example, which is one of my favorite, by the way, in Romania, we have 500,000 small and medium enterprises, which this category, as you know, in many European Union member states, they are the backbone of the economy. So we get a lot of conversation around those. Are they de facto critical infrastructures with the IT infrastructure and process and everything they do, or not? Depends on who you talk. If you talk to technical people or regulators, maybe not. Maybe they don't fall in the category of critical infrastructures. But de facto, for the state, for the economy, for the society, They are super, super important. So I think we see these kind of changes in the paradigm from a conceptual perspective that we absolutely need to tackle. And my biggest concern is that regulators are moving still super, super slow. Takes a lot of time for any bold decision, for anything that has to be implemented that we need actually yesterday. But of course, from a legal regulatory perspective, takes a lot of time. And in this context, private actors are moving super fast, academic environment is moving super fast, and I think we have to follow a bit.
Okay, great. Rastislav, if I can get your thoughts on sort of the situation and the security of critical infrastructure as well in Slovak Republic.
First of all, thank you very much for the invitation to the event and to panel as well. I would like to share with you a few opinions or my views to common things, and maybe to explain a few specific Slovak things or situations around topic. First of all, probably we would all agree with the sentence that internet is borderless and open and without any limitations, etc. But unfortunately, at the end, internet has a huge impact on the local level. Local means EU or a single country. So at the end, we should work with internet from this perspective. It's very nice that it's open and we should rely on the self-regulation, but any kind of disruption, any kind of outage of internet has a direct economic, social, even impact on democracy currently in a specific country. And in such situation, we see a lot of tries from different countries to act exterritorially, means even the legislation, which should be technically valid in the territorial place in the country, trying to enforce it exterritorially. So this is, for me, one problem. The other side, or other problem, became more visible with Ukraine. Not only now, but from the Crimea side, from the Crimea time back to 2014, we are not only on the internet, on cyberspace, but in general in a Cold War, the new era, new wave of the Cold War. And now, on the cyber side, we are not in Cold War anymore. We are in the hot war, which changed rules or remove even the last small remains of the rules, if any are even valid before. So game was changed. We may discuss if the regulation is prepared for those changed environment, or what kind of regulation, what kind of legislation should solve those things. On the local basis, chain is as strong as the weakest part. We, as a part of the implementation of the NIS transposition and the new cyber law in Slovakia, we said, okay, the size of the chain in Slovakia is much bigger than just few companies. And frankly, we don't see any difference between operator of essential service and a critical infrastructure company. There are process differences, legislation differences, but at the end, the impact on the country, impact on the society is same. So we said, okay, any company from the list of critical infrastructure belongs under the cyber law on the same level like any kind of operator of essential services. And we set up a set of sectors and subsectors with results of 1,700 plus companies under the cyber regulation. And we are pretty small, one of the smaller countries in Europe. We see in some other countries that for instance, even in, for instance, healthcare, after Corona time, we all see healthcare as even more important than before. And there are countries in Europe where there is no single company regulated in the cyber line in the healthcare sector. Why? Lobby, whatever, political reasons, I don't know. So we said no. The regulation should create environment where we would like to remove the weak points in the chain. That's one side. The other side is the cooperation and trust. Our way how we do cyber is built, frankly, completely different way than most of the countries in Europe. Besides many things, our regulation acts as an enabler to open and to foster trust between government and regulated companies. And we don't care if the regulated company is private or governmental. I don't care, technically, for me it's ownership structure at the end, and I don't care who is owner of the company. The point is the impact of the company on the society. If we are able to measure it, and we can set up rules, criteria on the impact, then we act and we require same level of preparedness for all subjects. But first of all, the worldwide statistics says that 95% of motivation for doing cyber for the companies, organizations is compliance, which looks good. Looks like we should support compliance requirements, which means regulation. But on the other side, we all understand that any kind of regulatory framework which is trying to work across sectors is defining basically same rules, same requirements for all sectors, and it doesn't work. Same requirements for the small city, hospital, or nuclear power plant is not good for anyone. So there should be a line of the sectorial regulation on the top of that minimum security baseline. And frankly, there are only a few sectors only willing to open such discussion, not even implement something like that. So for me, we are at the beginning of the long way, working with companies, working with their owners, with the management, trying to convince them that cybersecurity has a business impact, is not a game for a few geeks sitting somewhere in the basement, etc. And conferences like this are something who help us with this effort. Thank you.
Thank you. And Jacques, so I think your company specifically is an example of sort of the regulatory impact that governments can have on industries and create a kind of space for companies. Could you just quickly explain why?
Thank you very much, Lawrence, and hello to everyone. I'm very pleased to be here to share with you today. So at Gatewatcher, we provide software which are sensors analyzing the network of critical infrastructures to detect threats on these assets. So like, you know, in France, we have this kind of local law regulation, which is a kind of NIS2, but more sophisticated, which is mandatory for all the critical assets in finance, in healthcare, and all the critical industries to protect their infrastructure. And one of the rules number 7, is to deploy sensor on the network to detect threats. So yeah, we know a bit about the huge landscape of the threats touching the critical infrastructure, and I would like to share with you some thoughts about what is to be an entrepreneur in the critical infrastructure landscape with cybersecurity. Like, you have to deal with 3 challenges. The first one is to bring innovation. Like in a world of critical infrastructure with some very new technologies and some legacy and old architecture. We have a huge landscape of threats, and to match and to catch all the threats, the AI is a huge help to monitor all this landscape of threats. So first, innovation. Then you have to be able to deal with complexity, because there is a lot of complexity in the threats, of course, but complexity of the local regulation. We talk a lot about regulation, but when you are an entrepreneur, you have to deal with the needs of the authorities in regulation and the needs of the clients. And sometimes what the regulation is asking is just opposite of what the customer are asking. And the last point is, I mean, if you want to bring innovation and deal with the complexity, you have to hire and to work as a tight team with the best talents. So 7 years ago, when we started the company, it was quite hard to do fundraising in cybersecurity and especially in the critical infrastructure landscape. So we self-funded the company, and we just finished in February our first Series A funding of 25 million euros. But when you have no funding and you are self-funded and you have to deal with complexity and innovation, you have to work with the best talents. And the only way to achieve this challenge is to do it with a passion. And like with a passion, you get the best talent to work with you. So please remember innovation, complexity, and passion.
Thank you very much. And we're going to get into the regulatory details in a second. Before that, I want to bring in David real quick, because CISA and the United States government in general, also from the Biden administration, has been sort of developing its thinking on exactly what we've just heard on the interaction between business and government, and how business gets involved there's a direct line between business and government, and how involved government gets in the protecting sort of, the practical work of the operational work of protecting critical infrastructure and industries. I just want to get your sense of, where the US is going, for instance, with concepts like the JCDC, and if you can talk a little bit about where that's going and how you think that matches what we're seeing in Europe as well in terms of
Start by just describing what the JCDC is for those of you that don't know. It's the Joint Cyber Defense Collaborative. It's a government-private sector partnership innovation that is about 8.5 months old. Think about a partnership between Homeland Security in the United States, CISA as an element of Homeland Security, the FBI and other agencies concerned with cybersecurity of critical infrastructure, and critical infrastructure operators, and those with information about cyber threats to critical infrastructures, coming together to do more than just share information. Now, sharing information has a lot of variations to it. Often it's sharing risk advisories, sharing information on threat actors, historical trend analysis. Think of an operational version of that, where operationally technical subject matter experts are sharing risk insights, often in near real time, in support of enhanced incident response to a particular critical infrastructure disruption or incident. That's what the JCDC is about. So it's about sharing that incident response at the time of the incident, not after the incident. It's also about proactively sharing awareness of adversary TTPs or tactics, techniques, and procedures. It's about sharing risk concerns about complex sector or infrastructure systems, which are, as in many countries, are owned in the private sector. And it's about allowing for the careful merging of sensitive governmental information and sensitive private sector information to get better risk awareness about what's next. So it's a proactive strategy to enable partnership to allow the defense to catch up a little bit from the attackers who are serious and persistent.
I think one of the questions there is that Europe is grappling with as well is what is the balance between sort of having a partnership that is based on a voluntary cooperation versus imposing requirements which are binding by law. And the US has, to my sense, a very different approach to that as Europe. Can you talk a little bit about the merit of sort of the trust and the partnership approach?
You know, I think we have regulation, but CISA is not a regulator. We regulate in a couple of areas. One, federal enterprise cybersecurity, federal government. Let's see, non-intelligence, non-defense. We also regulate in the area of chemicals, the chemical facilities sector for counterterrorism purposes, separate from cyber. More generally, we have a voluntary model or a best practice centered, voluntary focused model for critical infrastructure cybersecurity. That's based on decisions that have been made over some decades that aligning incentives through collaboration and a whole collaborative framework that we maintain is better than seeking to regulate something that often we're not quite sure how to regulate it. And poorly designed regulation not only doesn't meet its objectives, but it can actually make collaboration harder while adversaries exploit differences between the public and private sector to achieve their effects. So sort of a 20-year debate, at least in the United States, has been between those who favor regulation and those who favor best practice private sector responses. Our response to that is that our administration's response is let's have both. We identify Section 9 entities, for example, that operate especially critical infrastructure, and we subject those to greater, at least, collaborative intensity, I guess I'll use that phrase. The JCDC is aimed at core infrastructure partners that provide services to other elements of the economy and to government services, so that by getting them collaborating and situationally aware, you're going to raise the ambient level of cybersecurity for everyone, for their customers, for government's awareness of sector risk, and for our ability to then use our special concerns about adversaries, be they China, Russia, or others, to communicate clearly to the private sector. I think one of the biggest problems that I've observed in sort of 20, 25 years in this business is that, you know, we try and convey urgency when we're talking about threat messaging, but we don't give actionable guidance on what to do. It's one thing to say bad things are out there. It's quite another to say bad things are out there that are going to affect your business, affect your livelihood, affect safety and security. So the more actionable guidance the government can provide to the private sector, the better. On the other hand, the private sector needs to be willing to trust that government's doing so in a dispassionate, unbiased basis to build that trust basis for persistent, continuous collaboration.
Thank you. And Dan, I want to bring you in on that, and Rastislav as well, because obviously Europe is building the regulatory framework to try and set up a similar sort of system, a joint sort of system and ecosystem between government and private sector. The question is, are we getting the balance right? What's your take?
I pretty much agree with David. We need both. We cannot go 100% regulatory approach and or 100% allow the industry to self-regulate. One thing that we are kind of fighting very, very hard in Romania is really the resistance of some organizations that shall be in scope of regulation. Just to give a very simple example, we identified about 2,000 operators of essential services. At this moment, there's regulation. We have registered in the range of 800, and some of the ones that are not in the list. So technically, they did not commit yet to the level of security that we expect. They did not commit to allocation of resources and budgets and to hiring CISOs and teams and stuff. Some of those, in certain cases, gave very, very simple answer. We don't believe we are an operator of essential services according to the law. And guess what? The moment they get a major incident hitting their business and they start bleeding millions by day because of an incident, suddenly they reach out, surprise, surprise, to the governmental regulator. Please help. provide some quick technical expertise, allocate resources, deploy teams, etc., etc. So unfortunately, I still believe there is still lack of awareness with decision makers in organizations, all levels, all domains, public, private, etc. Still lack of awareness about the fact that cybersecurity, it's serious stuff. It's expensive, but nevertheless, and I wrap up on this, is much less expensive than a major incident. So if we put this in balance, and I think if we succeed as a regulator to explain the cost, not only the penalty, the fine, but really the business cost, the reputation cost that they incur in case something goes wrong, I think we'll turn around a lot of those.
Is the new version of the NIS2 directive, so the Network and Information Security Directive that's being built out at the European level, is that going to solve practically some of these questions around who's in, who's out, and actually have sort of a uniform standard across Europe? Rastislav, if I can bring you in.
First of all, NIS2 definitely not able to solve things. You can't solve things by regulation. Regulation is enabler. Regulation is the way you may use to some extent. The rest is knowledge, trust, and partnership. But I'd like to add a point to the discussion about regulation versus, let's say, voluntary approach. We already have both. NIS in general is an approach which creates a small set of regulated organizations from the whole set of organizations in general. For us in Slovakia, we have 300,000 companies plus, and currently 1,700 are regulated. So the rest is not. The rest has no regulation, no mandatory duties. And same problems, same threats, same vulnerabilities at the end, same problems. So we should work with the whole society, not only with regulated companies. So I don't think that's the point. The point is how to convince managers and owners that it is important. If there is an incident, we came to the organization, regardless if it's regulated or not. Usual reactions, actually there are two reactions from the management. First reaction for me, very surprised reaction, is that the managers and owners are running around the table in the meeting room and shouting like, what we gonna happen, what we gonna happen, what we gonna do. Okay, you should know what to do. It's part of your preparation phase. And the second reaction is, yes, but all my colleagues convinced me that we are completely ready. And usually it means that the IT guy usually changed the toner in the printer and copy machine, said that we are ready for the cyber in the organization. So that's why we introduced, which is rare in Europe, frankly, we introduced the mandatory duty for the regulated company to have a special type of cybersecurity audit every 2 years. Not from the government. We try to remove the connection between efficient cyber defense or cybersecurity and the government officials. You know, the political changes, every election change half of the government, etc. So we said no. We might do our duty, which is regulatory things, legislation, but the real operation should be done somewhere else. So our auditors are private organizations, actually private persons, and doing audit to the group of regulated companies, and that audit should be handed over to government. So now the sentence, we don't know that we are so vulnerable to different threats, is not true anymore, because the owner or statutory body of the company, general director, presidents, knows very well where they have problem. And frankly, by law, there is even crime type responsibility for the statutory body for the cyber security in his organization. And he can't really excuse that, sorry, I don't know.
So no excuses, that's not going to fly anymore. Margiris, I want to ask you about how governments actually fit into that. But first, I want to just mention that if you have a question on this part of our discussion, don't hesitate to raise your hand, and I will bring you in a second. So Margiris, I think one of the questions right now, very topical in Europe's negotiation on the NIS2 reform is, if it's about awareness, if it's about making business leaders understand the importance of cybersecurity, does government get a free pass? To what extent is government actually under the same requirements? Can it set or lead by example? What's your take there, and why is this part so hard in the current negotiations over the NIS2 directive?
Yeah, so just to follow a little bit, the arguments here. I think, yes, of course, we have to do both, convince, talk, share best practices, but also regulate, that is natural. The question is where you put the emphasis. And I really believe that there will be no change if we put emphasis on sharing best practices, sharing information, sharing experience. When we put emphasis, we'll put emphasis on, and elements, key elements were mentioned, mandatory audits, personal responsibility, sanctions, then, it's, that's why we have, rules. That's why we have law in many areas, and cyber is not an exception. So we have to have a very clear set of rules, and everyone should have, should follow them. Otherwise, we will be, talking about it. Whether this will be solved by NIS2, no, not everything will be solved by NIS2, but I really look into NIS2 and the whole discussion in EU that we are talking about the minimum standards, but nobody, kind of limits you to go for upper standards. And I think many countries do nationally, which are ready, and that answers your question probably on public administrations. I really believe that public administrations is really critical to have, that they should comply to the same rules as a critical infrastructure. No question about that. In our case, those organizations I was speaking, several hundred organizations, it's critical sector operators and state institutions. There is no exception there. Of course, there are sensitivities and many arguments why countries have sensitivities. I don't want to go into details, but when it comes to Lithuanian position, we have been always for a very ambitious solution, and there is no alternative to that. And I really hope that at the moment when everyone will kind of translate NIS2 into national legislation, in many countries, ambition will be much higher than we agree at the EU level.
Okay, great. I have a question right here. I think I can hand you my mic, because I'm not sure if there's a mic in the room.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the presentation. I'm working for the London Stock Exchange Group, and I had a question to bounce back on what was said concerning governance and cyber awareness. We now see various different governance for cybersecurity within private company, which sometimes may lead to dead end in implementing public policies. CISA position is indeed never the same depending on type of company or organization. And sometimes CISO, for example, will be linked to CTO or CEO or CRO in sometimes, so risk or IT or general direction. And therefore, could we imagine in the near future a mandatory requirement in a regulation or a law or a standard that would define at which level, for once, should the CISO be linked?
Who wants to take it? Rastislav.
Actually, it's a very good question, thank you. In Slovakia, the CISA, or we call it in the legislation, the cybersecurity manager is a mandatory position for every regulated company. We define the amount of knowledge, and we are preparing to set up a duty to be certified, but it's too soon for it. The market is not still so huge for this kind of people. And we define in the law also where that position could not be implemented in the organization. In general, this is a position which shouldn't be or could not be by the law as a part of the IT operation line, service development line, etc. So it should be an independent or somewhere. In banks, it's easy. They usually have an audit departments, which is side of the rest of the operation. So the position there is good. In general, we define that position should have direct access to the top manager of the company in order to deliver message about the security situations, etc. But frankly, it's defined in the law. It's not easy to find that amount of skilled people in the market, which is anyway the biggest problem for the cybersecurity stuff.
Okay, Dan?
Thank you. Just to chip in and to share a view on this, let's not forget they are not the logos, the technologies themselves providing a certain level of cybersecurity. It's always about the people with roles and responsibilities. And let's not forget to give an example from a different domain. About 20 years ago, when the Sarbanes-Oxley Act put an emphasis on the role of the CFO in a company with regards to financial reporting, to internal controls, things started improving. The moment when, by regulation, we are going to put focus on CISO or equivalent, whatever, Chief Risk Officer, and so on and so on. And we have already, for example, in Europe, with GDPR, we have data protection officers and stuff like that. But the moment we are going to put systematical emphasis on the role and on the person that has to deliver, I truly believe things are going to dramatically improve in cybersecurity as well.
Thank you. I want to get into supply chain security for a second because it's such a important and, for that matter, hot topic in critical infrastructure discussion as well. We've seen one example in recent weeks where authorities in Europe, but also beyond, have sort of responded to the crisis in Ukraine by warning companies inside their own countries to stop using antivirus software from Kaspersky, a Russian company. And I'm just quoting the blog post that the NCSC's Ian Levy, so the UK cyber agencies, Ian Levy put out on this. He said, and seriously, if you're a critical national infrastructure provider who relies on Russian technology for the operation of your systems, you should probably come and talk to us. This was sort of a funny way of saying, how is this a problem that we're facing right now across the West? Margiris, just to get your sense, how big is the backlog that we're fighting against when it comes to supply chain security in European countries?
You know, I was already saying, I think that is a big issue and a big challenge, especially long term, and especially in a crisis situations. Although in cyber, we sometimes hear that we, peacetime, wartime, I agree that in cyber we don't have peace. So really, when you rely on technologies of adversaries, it poses you to a number of risks, which definitely you don't want to be exposed, nor during peacetime, nor especially in a conflict war, and if you're in a conflict with that adversary. So I think, and that was not the only case where, regulators clearly highlighted the risk and gave recommendations to get rid of different software or hardware. But when we started to build our strategy, I think what we realized and what is important to understand, but it will be very difficult if we go on ad hoc basis. If we go from, from one company to the other company, very quickly you will have another brand, from the same country providing similar services or similar. So, you leave too much gray zone if you go only on ad hoc basis and from company to company. And that's why our solution and approach was that, first you have to understand what's your adversary and on which countries you don't want to depend technologically, and then go for more systematic solutions. And I would call it zero risk, approach. We really don't want to have any risks here.
I think yes, Jacques, please.
Thank you. I just want to add some point on the supply chain issue, and something we are forgetting a lot is the security by design of course of the infrastructure, but also of all the components of the infrastructure, and especially the software and the cybersecurity software. And most of the customers are asking only for friendly features to operate their cybersecurity, but they're not asking for hardening and security by design of the software. So in France, it comes a lot from the regulation. It's mandatory. But we can see that if it's not mandatory, no one is doing it because it costs money and it needs more flexibility to build innovation on hardening. And I think this is a weak point of NIS2 and of the supply chain issue, is that we do not focus enough on the hardening.
Okay, thank you. Yes, David, please.
Just an intervention. I don't know the NIS2 issue very well, but I do know a little bit about our struggles with understanding supply chains as ecosystems rather than serial processes. And we, especially in the areas of open source software, dependencies on libraries that are hidden or segmented inside broader packages, it's often hard to characterize what the supply chain is. So having knowledge of what your supply chains are, software bills of materials are mentioned, things like that give you granular knowledge at the level of tool makers, so that when software is developed, it self-annotates so that you're able to understand your critical dependencies, and then if you choose to regulate, you'll have more refined, more focused regulatory impact. That's something that we're working on at CISA, and something that you may have heard of, the Cyber Safety Review Board that we set up about 9 months ago, is working on exactly that question right now relative to Log4j.
And out of curiosity, Europe has gone through a debate around telecom security, telecom supply chain security with Huawei, and in the past years. Just looking at that as an example, this is one company, arguably two, with ZTE taken into account, and the multi-year process for the European Union to get on one line in this specific issue. It's a very big industry, but at the same time, I almost have to have the feeling that there must be 1,000 other examples out there that still need to be looked at or done. I'm just curious about your sense of how you see this discussion develop in Europe in the last years, and where you think we are on this.
Each country and each trading group has their own approaches, and I think a lot of that's in national traditions on what you're used to in terms of governmental interventions in those sorts of issues. For a long time, industrial policy in the United States has been controversial, and we rise and fall on the degree to which we're willing to consider, when you say intervening in supply chains, just talking about supply chains is often an adventure in the United States. I think that one thing is clear, that the diversity of supply in critical technologies and materials is as much a concern as the supply chain. For example, the diversity of supply of telecom equipment manufacturers now versus 10, 15 years ago is much less diverse. So the supply base is narrower, so the impact of a Huawei or a ZTE is greater because they have market concentration. That removes choice from the consumer side of the house and makes us all more dependent on perhaps risky sources of technology where we lack real affordable alternatives. So looking at heterogeneity of of markets on the supply side, making sure that you actually participate in the innovative parts of that supply chain so that you have national or at least more trusted alternatives strikes me as important.
Okay, thank you. Just another look at the room. I see we've got a question there. If I can ask, if it's not about it, wait, there's a microphone here as well.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Thank you. Every country here being represented has been attacked during the last month, and sometimes I would say it were very easy DOS attacks on everyday companies, infrastructures. So do you agree today that we have to impose a set of rules from some industries in the EU or even the US?
It's an open question.
I think that it is too much to just ask the question, should you impose a set of rules? Industries operate under legal jurisdiction in every other domain, so that there will be a set of guidelines or best practice standards in cyber and critical infrastructure, just like there are in any other. As for whether we need new rules or new practices, I believe in innovation and that we should always be taking a second look at how we do things. The fact is, the risk record of the last decade and a half in cyber is not very good. Attackers are not being disempowered of their ability to intervene in critical infrastructure. Defenders have a hard time reducing risk in a measurable way. It doesn't mean it's impossible, it just means that it's not getting easier fast enough, because adversaries are very, very capable. So doing something about risk reduction, achieving measurable risk reduction might be more important than rules. Just my pragmatic view.
I'm going to use it to also pivot to, I think, what was one of the problems of Europe's development of a regulatory framework. Because if you look at the enforcement and the implementation of the NIS1, the first iteration of the Cybersecurity Directive on critical infrastructure, we have to be honest with ourselves. Maybe, Dan, you have to be honest with Romania. I'm Belgian. I have to be honest with Belgium. The speed of implementation of that law was not very good, and I think our two countries are examples where it really failed to do it in a speedy way. So my question is, what's the sense of urgency right now as we're looking at sort of agreeing on this new reform, on this new revamped NIS directive? Thank you.
So thank you so much for the question. I acknowledge we're not the best students as a country in implementing the NIS directive. However, we took some proactive actions, anticipating a bit elements from the NIS2, and we already put in some local law, things like cloud service provider, hosters, content, and so on, that we already anticipated and put in the local law. But one element I would like to mention, I think in rolling out, in effectively implementing some of those regulatory measures, in particular EU directives, we can do it a lot faster and learned a lot from the past, from the way it went, with the good parts and the bad parts. And honestly, at this very moment, if we can talk about the NIS2, I think we should get it done as soon as possible, because we absolutely need it. We need clarity, we need direction, and whether it's business or so operators of essential services or regulators, we need to really act a lot faster than before. Also, one element I wanted to mention, because there is a lot of discussion, what should be in the scope, what should be out of scope, and it goes on and on and on and on. I believe a lot that certain organizations that really are more mature, where the leadership, the decision makers in those organizations, the boards, the CEOs, they really understand the importance of a certain level of cybersecurity. I mean, I'm not talking about minimal levels, but really set a quite high standard and transform this in a competitive advantage. I think these ones will be the champions that will set the tone in particular industries, To give an example, in Romania, financial sector, definitely it's quite mature. Energy sector is quite mature. Healthcare sector, not that mature. So we have about 700 hospitals, more than half of them very low level of maturity. So they need really a lot of help. They need a lot of push. And in terms of bringing new regulation, fundamentally by itself, that will not change too many things. We need to show the examples. We need to support those guys. And honestly, we need to inject a lot of budget and resources in getting their maturity level at the right level.
Rastislav, you want to comment?
I would just add a few numbers from the results of our audit. It's quite objective results because we do it mandatory across the whole group. Frankly, the sentences like banking sector are mature, are nice, but not true, at least in most countries. Mature means that they are part of banks which are very mature, and the rest are far below average. Numbers for Slovakia, we have 28 banking companies with banking licenses. Very easy number from the audit is percentage of compliance, which is not very usable number, but in general. On one side, 97% within the banking sector, on the other side, 12%. Frankly, from those 28 banking institutions, 2 are very good, 3 more are above average, and the rest is average and below. So that's a sector which is regulated a very long time. The first cyber regulation was done based on the European Central Bank order back in 2004, and still you see results. Same with energy. The big energy companies are quite good. But there is a lot of small energy companies or smaller energy companies. There is a usual setup of the infrastructure operator and the sales organization. But the sales organization has ability to impact operation as well to some extent. And from, for instance, Colonial Pipeline, we see that attack was on the sales side at the end, the finance side, with the huge results. So, fact that somebody is not doing real infrastructure operation, but only the sales side, doesn't mean it's less vulnerable or the results of the incident is less terrible. The complication is huge, and I don't want to really make easy judgment on sector. There are sectors very bad, and the rest is from almost 0 to almost 100% based on the company, not based on the sector.
Okay, that's interesting. I'm curious. I mean, what's the solution there? Is it about sort of a proactive approach from government to or from authorities to more actively go and engage with the sector, or is it really in the hands of the sector themselves, and are they just underestimating the risk here?
Talk. Work with the sector. The ISAC is one line, for instance. The US is very well built in the ISAC area. We are trying to do it in Europe. Not very good, frankly. Any kind of European site, ISACs doesn't work and will never work. It should be local level, etc. But we should work with companies. You mentioned, for instance, many times here the fines, for instance, as a part of the enforcement. For me, even it should be in the legislation. That's not the way. If I will issue fine to the company for something, and I'm trying in the same time to build trust with that company, it doesn't work. Okay. And frankly, from the real life, usual reason for the company not being good enough is that they don't have problem with if they want or not. They have problem they don't know how. And they are ashamed to tell this loudly that we don't know please help us.
That's interesting.
Just on that point, we provide what we call free services. Actually, they're paid for by the U.S. taxpayer. But we provide services to small to medium-sized enterprises and to larger businesses. And we have a field force of advisors that will actually go to companies on request and review and help them write security plans and help them reinforce their performance. That kind of collaboration builds trust faster. And you always need the trust, even if you ultimately decide you need to regulate.
Jacques, you want to come in?
Yes, and I would like also to come back to the decision makers issue. A lot of CISO would like to do more about it. Like they just want to invest more in their cybersecurity, but they just cannot. They have like not enough budget, not enough team, and then like, we come back to the education needs to increase the team, which is a huge need, but to help the CISO to get the budget. And in France, I know that ANSSI has done a great job going with the CISO to the COMEX to explain how it is important to protect the critical infrastructure, and like the budget comes from the COMEX.
If you have a question, this might be your last chance. We're running into the last 10 minutes of the discussion. There's one more topic I want to get into, which I'll probably do now. I think one element we haven't discussed yet is sort of the international effort to impose norms on cybersecurity and responsible state behavior. And an important part of that that Europe, the US, and like-minded countries have been pushing for is a limit or a restriction or an agreement that attacking critical infrastructure is out of is beyond what we're willing to tolerate. I'm just curious with what we're seeing in Ukraine, and maybe specifically on the incident that happened to Viasat, the satellite communications company. I'm wondering if an assessment of the reaction we've now seen with this joint attribution, whether it's clear that that is beyond the red line that the West wants to draw there, and how you think the West should be enforcing that red line going forward.
I'll just speak for us. I mean, I'm not sure it's a question of red lines. I think it's a question of norms that states have said that they will adhere to, and it's clearly a violation of a norm that Russia adhered to, said that it was going to adhere to in terms of critical infrastructure. Now, it's the spillover effect, the fact that whatever was done by Russia, we've attributed to Russia and Russian-backed groups, had such broader effects in Europe, shows why prescribed acts against critical infrastructure is a good idea. It also showed that it occurred that Russia talked a good game, didn't adhere to the norm for their special military operation or whatever the current terminology is that they use. Whatever they did, they chose to do probably mindful that it would have spillover effects that weren't easily limited. We have to observe that a country that said that it adhered to this norm violated it and continues to violate it, and that I think is a metric for how broadly a norm is adhered to by an autocratic country. Democratic countries, one thing in terms of norm development. When one deals with autocratic countries, it's more complicated, as we all know.
The question, of course, is how to change that behavior, and I'm just wondering, are we happy with the penalty that Russia's faced for this so far?
I'd like to ask a little bit different question. On the United Nations level, there is a very, very big discussion on different group of countries, discussing if we have already international norms on acting in the cyberspace, or other group prefer to start working on creation new set of rules for the cyberspace. Discussion looks very, very legitimate, but I would like to add one point. You know how long process is to create new set of rules on anything on the United Nations level? Who knows? It's 20, 25, 30 years. So the group of countries trying to create a new set of rules because, by their opinion, we don't have any currently valid for cyberspace, means that for next 25 to 30 years we would not have any kind of rules for behaving in the cyberspace. While the other group, no secret that the other group is containing of EU countries, US and other like-minded countries, are on the opinion that we have regulation, we have rules on how to act. And if there are like a small bits and pieces not well tailored for the cyber, let's correct those small things, but not start with a clean desk for the next 25 years. And that's the United Nations regulatory level.
Margiris, you've been involved in this discussion at EU and beyond that. Can you?
I wanted to react because we are looking through norms perspective, and I think when it comes to Russia, this is a wrong perspective to look, because we violated all possible norms, be it cyber, other areas. So it doesn't help to look through that. Russia is at war with Ukraine. It's at war with NATO, and it's been at war with Western countries in cyberspace for many years. So I don't think that looking through norms and yes, we said that we will adhere to some of the norms, but I think you should always cautiously look to this. But my point, and also you said whether the response was enough for what they did. So I believe in this case also we should not look through the norms perspective or through attribution perspective, or I think one, and I'm sure that Ukrainians gave them a response. And when you attacked, I think this is very natural that you use also cyber offensive to counteract. And then I think and that was discussed in a previous session with phenomena. I would say a special phenomena of hacktivism, those people coming. And again, we tend to look into these activities through also norms perspective, but I think these are people who want to be on the right side. And as we support Ukraine with all the means we can, those people are trying to give an answer with cyber means.
Okay, great. We have just a couple of minutes on the clock, and then I have one last question, and the answers can be short on this one, but I'm going to ask all of you. So tomorrow there is a negotiation between representatives of the EU institutions to try and finalize this NIS2 directive. We've talked about scope, we've talked about information sharing, we've talked about how to build a new model. As these people get into a room tomorrow and try and get the details right of this new regulatory approach of Europe, what's the sort of the last piece of advice you want to give today for people going into that room tomorrow to finish that negotiation? I know some of you are deep in the weeds in this, others a little less so, but I want to ask all of you for a response nevertheless.
Very quick, yesterday I met with someone who are cheering, or have been for half a year cheering, those negotiations, and they were very convinced that everything will be fine tomorrow, so we don't have to worry.
Well, all things good then. David?
I'll defer to those who know NIS and the European Union's complexities on that question. Thanks.
Well, you could have also pitched the US model and just to transpose that into Europe, but it's
I'm not sure that would necessarily work.
It speaks to your moderation. Thank you.
From my side, is just get it done. That's the message, and I personally offer to buy a glass of wine to all the members of the committee if they succeed by tomorrow.
We're taking note of that.
I am on the same page with Dan. Whatever topics are open for tomorrow's discussion, they don't have huge impact on almost anything. Most of those things could be solved by the national legislation anyway, So if somebody want to be better, regardless NIS2, it's possible. So let's make things done.
Jacques.
I would just tell them to keep their ambition high, because anyway the critical infrastructure owner will always do less than they need to do. So if they do it higher, we will have a medium ambition.
Okay, great, thank you. We'll know tomorrow if Dan is buying drinks next time around. And in the meantime, I want to thank everyone for joining us in the room. I want to thank people watching online as well. And next up, I'm happy to announce there's a keynote speech of Kalle Laanet, who is Minister of Defense of Estonia, which will be right here.
Dear Paris Cyber Week participants, in Estonia, cybersecurity is not just another domain. It means protecting our way of life as a whole. 15 years have passed since the first known cyber attacks against an entire nation. Estonia was the first nation ever targeted. But tough pressure creates diamonds, and tough pressure also made Estonia cybersecurity heavyweight. Estonia has been a long-term partner for Ukraine in enhancing its cybersecurity capacity and resilience. After my visit to Kiev last week, I am stronger than ever in my conviction when I say that Estonia will continue its support to Ukraine in every possible way until Ukraine wins this war. However, we should not write our cyber policies based on what we have observed during the war in Ukraine, from 24th of February until this day. We should not forget that Ukraine has been at war with Russia for 8 years now. And during that time, we have seen cyber operations varying from website defacements to knocking down energy grids in various parts of Ukraine. The malicious cyber activities carried out against Ukraine so far are proof that cyber operations have a significant role in today's warfare. The war is not over. Only a month ago, there was an attempt by a Russian state-sponsored hacking group to take down a Ukrainian energy provider. Fortunately, this attack was neutralized. What we have also observed is that countries who strongly support Ukraine have also become and remain a target for malicious cyber activity. The threat is there, and we should keep investing in cybersecurity and bolstering our cyber defense. Ukrainians have taught us a lesson. Tomorrow's cyber attacks can simply be resisted by preparing today. Since the attacks in 2007, Estonia massively raised the stakes in cyber defense. We should not afford to leave anything to chance. A year later, in 2008, we already created the first whole-of-government cybersecurity strategy. Attacks against our systems happen daily, and it would probably be naive to believe we can prevent all cyber incidents from happening. Instead, our focus should be on resilience. We should ensure that even if we fall victim to a malicious cyber operations, it will not have a significant impact on our daily activities. The European Union has a large role to play here, especially in protecting critical information infrastructure, raising the awareness and competence of our citizens, industry and government, and of course, EU institutions, and fostering international cooperation. Two crucial elements for improving our cyber resilience are secure ICT services, products, and well-trained cyber operators. Therefore, with the Estonian-initiated PESCO project, Cyber Range Federation, our intention together with the 6 nations is to provide a state-of-the-art environment for such training, but also for research and development activities enabling to implement the principle of security by design. We also want to work closer with our private sector to make sure that innovation is a priority. Therefore, Estonia, together with Norway, has started a new project called the Open Cyber Range. Its main aim is to develop cybersecurity thinking in private companies and in the education sector. We provide the Cyber Range as a platform for companies to test, develop, and validate their new products.